being a business owner, regardless of the business, what you bring to the forefront publicly, because guns sometimes can be one of those topics where people love it, hate it, scared 100%. Of them, don't even want to talk to you because you have a picture of a gun on your profile, so you got to be aware of those things. Yeah. But it sounds like you've integrated in your life fairly well, and things are going all right.
Yeah, I will tell you this. So it doesn't change anything about what we've done here, what we do here at the gym. The podcast, Iron Sights podcast, obviously there's a, sort of a compare and contrast there with the old school versus the new school, Red Dot versus Iron Sights. That really started down kind of, again, the old school versus new school, and bringing some of the newer generation with the older generation together and talking about fitness and health and entrepreneurship. And specifically, now we're doing a bit more talking about the firearms community. And the reason I'm doing that more now than I did is because more than ever, we're under fire. And what I mean by that is our Second Amendment rights are being challenged more than they ever have. And there's more misinformation, and there's more people rallying to take those rights away from us at a time more than ever where I think we need to be fighting back for those. And so now it's become, again, those that didn't know, before, that are members of the gym, they know now. But it's not what you're seeing out there on the fitness floor.
For sure.
Right? What we do in the gym isn't that. But the point is the same.
Yeah, no, and I love what you just talked about too, because Washington State, where I'm from, they just passed the magazine ban, no more than 10 rounds.
Congratulations on joining the club.
It sucks. And I thought, it's funny because I thought we were moving away from that, because once you're in, probably like fitness, probably like jiu-jitsu, and especially like the gun world, right? Once you're in it, you realize it's not this fearful thing. Everyone who doesn't know, everyone who's ignorant about it thinks it's, this wild world where it's like, no, it's actually a pretty normal thing. Most of the country has them, and so from the ignorance legislation being passed to that affects so many people unrealistically, it's kind of a shame. So I think it's to your point, super important to be preaching that, hey, firearms can be safe, used properly, talking about it more, getting it out into the limelight, because the more people doing that, the better for those rights, for sure.
I appreciate that. It's just the community, interestingly, is as hard as it's being, fought against right now, that is 2A. The back end of this is the community is growing at an exponential rate.
Yep.
The acceptance of it and normalization of it is coming at an all-time high. And the firearms industry is exploding from a financial and economic perspective. From the gear industry to the media industry, there are so many things here. And to your point, just like on the jiu-jitsu side of things, my only experiences since I've been more active and now proactive in the community have been nothing but positive.
Yep.
We are talking amazing people, intelligent, articulate people. Now, to your point, there's a ton of ignorance that surrounds it within the community as well.
Yep.
And, just like anything, there's good and bad. I think there's, I kind of look at things on a spectrum, right? You got all the way over here and you got all the way over there. And then there's the people in the middle that are, some are very fearful. I don't want to be part of that way over there. That is just too much for me. And then there's others no, I'm trying to get over there to that extreme side.
Yeah.
People are trying to figure it out. And I really think it's important that we come together as a community to have conversations, intelligent ones.
Yep.
Right. And to welcome new members in, right. To maybe check those that have been gatekeeping at one end of the spectrum.
Yep.
Right. To also check the people at the other end of the spectrum that are very, very extreme, maybe in their views and their language, and go, look, man, it's America, feel, do, whatever you want there, but understand what the ramifications are, of acting or behaving or saying or stating or doing whatever those things may have on the remainder of the community. We should be coming together, not dividing.
For sure.
And so that's what we're spending as much time as we can doing that's relevant.
Yeah, no, man, I dig that. And I've been in real life situations where I've needed to use my jiu-jitsu for self-defense and protecting those around me. And I've, with Good for the Soul, trying to preach, hey, self-defense. And a part of that is firearms. If you're, out of shape, if you're a smaller individual, sometimes having a tool is going to be the right move for you. Sometimes. And so, just like, trying to get people excited about jiu-jitsu fitness, how do you get people excited about firearms? Like, what is that first step for that new person going into like, wait, I hear about guns. A lot of people have them like, they're frightened. What's step one?
Yeah, I think that's a really great conversation. I think that's the gap we're trying to bridge right now, because what they're hearing, usually step one in terms of their information they're gathering about firearms, is anything they're hearing from the media, which tends to be very, very one-sided. Mm-hmm. It's, it's gun violence. This, for every bullet is one dead child. It's never anything good. We're never talking about anything but the tragedy that comes out of a particular situation that happens to involve a firearm. Right. There's so much of that, so many tragic situations happen on a daily basis, but it seems to get highlighted, and there's no shortage of politicians that will never let any sort of quote unquote crisis go to waste. Right. So when one of these things pops up, there's always some legislation that's getting pushed or always. It's just a hot topic right now. So I think you have to go to the right places to have those conversations, and there's not a lot of them. Right. So usually that starts with somebody that that has a gun. Yep. Right. And then I'm going to go back to my spectrum, right, left, and middle, whatever. I don't mean that, politically on the right and the left. I just mean there's these opposite ends.
You're either super
the pendulum swings. Yep. And they may not be articulate. They may not be very good at explaining that to you. And that interaction could be the deciding factor for them going away. And then all they need is to have their negativity reconfirmed through something I see in Instagram or on the news at night. So I think what we need to be doing is normalizing the conversation. I would think we need to be having this at a much higher level instead of guns be gone, guns be gone, guns be gone. We need to be addressing the fucking issue. Yep. And I get really fired up about this because while gun manufacturing, gun parts, ammo, those are all things, but firearms as an industry is not the problem. Right. Society is a problem, right? Our culture around violence is a problem. Our cultures around and society and what our acceptance level or tolerance level is to crime is the problem. And what we tolerate, we're essentially accepting, and we're giving permission to. And we need to stop tolerating a lot of things and have more intelligent conversations at a higher level about how to resolve the problems. And mental health is a massive issue. And there's not a mass shooter out there that hasn't had a massive health issue, right, and has been passed through the system. So those are things. And there are people that are having these conversations. Just one example, by the way. There are many, many people that are having these conversations. And on this platform, I'm getting the opportunity to have these conversations with some really, really intelligent, passionate, people that are coming to it with a very strong, but informed and heartfelt most of the time message about how to kind of make these things better. And it's not a conversation that's just going to happen in one sitting. For sure.
It's a constant conversation. I mean, that's going to go on forever and has since the foundation of this country, because the left, right, people are trying to take rights away. People are trying to keep them, it's always going back and forth. So I think it's super important. But you brought up something that's very relatable to I think every industry again is, hey, if that first person's interaction with firearms is just a buddy who has one and they go to the range and they have a bad experience, or they're talking to them about it and they're so far down the rabbit hole and one of those gatekeepers that it kind of pushes them away from it. It's like, that's going to be super unfortunate, and because it's the same thing in jiu-jitsu.
I was just going to liken it to
fitness. If you go in and you freaking roll with the wrong person on your first day in jiu-jitsu, you're never coming back. And I've been responsible for that before, and I feel super bad, and I've tried to bring some of my friends into jiu-jitsu and they had a bad experience. It's like, why did that happen? I had to look at it like, okay, like this was the incorrect procedure to bring someone in jiu-jitsu. Yeah, same thing.
It's the same in fitness. Yeah. And I relate a lot of what I see in the firearms industry right now, particularly through social media, to where fitness it was, maybe 10, 15 years ago, in terms of a lot of bad information being passed out there. There's very low barrier of entry of becoming an instructor. People can kind of say they're experts based on their resumes or their backgrounds or whatever else. And that's a problem, and it's going to have to be policed. There's not an overnight solution to this. So I think the community as a whole needs to hold a higher level of accountability to the people within the community. Yep. Right. And I think within that means these ends of the spectrum coming together to create conversation hence the podcast, to why civilians need to be talking with military or ex-military that are learning and doing and training different ways, and law enforcement and with military and law enforcement with civilians, and having these open dialogue questions so that there's more access and provide so that we can provide more access to healthy conversation, right? And good information. And that includes instruction. And I honestly believe, because what we saw in the fitness industry was this very same thing happened with coaching. And over time, so what you saw initially was like the professionals have been in it a while, me included, were just like, what is this shit? This guy doesn't know two things about fitness. He's got his shirt off. He's got abs. He's dancing around. He's got 40,000 followers. And now everybody thinks he's a fitness expert, and he's got some diarrhea tea he's selling, to everybody, right? That's kind of where firearms has been lately, right? Because there's this huge pie, right? And everybody can get in, and there's a low barrier of entry to get into it. And you can kind of say anything. And again, there's a lot of money being spent. It's a huge industry, and you can kind of get away with it for a while. And it took years for the fitness industry, and still there's awful, like, ridiculous. Right, you're going to
end up with the McDojos of fitness and firearm
industry.
That's
a great way to look at it. And so what happened was ultimately the industry was pushing back on it, going, dude, don't listen to this jerk off. Like this is the problem. Like, we need to stop this. Please, please, please don't listen to this. And I'll try to provide you a better pathway. I'm not saying I'm the only way, but here, try this instead, or maybe look at it differently. Right. And then you had finally consumers, because the industry was doing a bit of a better job connecting with the consumer and trying to provide that education, start to hold these people accountable, going, oh, I've seen this big jackass before, right? Like, I don't need this. And when the next one comes along, it's like, no. And now you're seeing a lot less of it than you did. Yep. We're going to have the same evolution in the firearms industry, and, the world of preparedness and these things. We hopefully gets cleaned up a little bit quicker. And we take a little bit higher level of responsibility than maybe the fitness industry did, with in terms of coming together, because there's no regulating bodies or anything like that. So it really is going to be about the people that really care coming together, trying to do what's right, being humble about it, right? Asking the right questions, and I think cross-pollinating, which is really important. And again, no gatekeeping.
Well, I like what you brought up of, hey, the military guys are going to talk to the civilians, be talking to the cops. Like, everyone's going to need to have that open line of communication, because everyone has something to share, and you're going to make the world, society more comfortable in the U.S. with firearms if we're all open about it, all talking about it.
300%. And why wouldn't we want to do that? I think this is the bigger conversation. Like, okay, so I understand you're a war fighter, man. You just spent 20 years of your life in some of the hottest, most dangerous offensive places, in the world. And that is one type of training. And I want to hear about it, and I want to learn what you're doing, but I'm not in that situation. I'm in a different type of hot situation. I'm not on the offensive. I'm trying to be on the defensive. Right. Yep. And you have some skills, but so do I. I've now learned some things. Like, you were taught a certain way, and a lot of these guys will tell you in my conversations with them, like, they learned some pretty dogmatic shit. When they got out of their sort of either whether it's LEO or military, that initial training, they then went to the field, and then there was somebody there that put their arm around them and went, yeah, well, so I know what they just taught you, and that shit's so outdated and antiquated now. Like, I'm going to have to reteach you. So I need you to be on my hip, right? And don't get killed. Yep. That kind of a thing. And so on the flip side of that, so they ought to know, like, that even the things that they know there are going to be different in different situations. So how do we help people in all walks of life within our community understand situational awareness, like firearms, preparedness, how to not get yourself in a situation, how to get yourself out of there without ever having to buy or to bring a firearm to the table? Is it, jiu-jitsu again is one tool. Like, is that the answer? Absolutely not. Can it be part of the equation? Totally. Right. You can build self-confidence. It can also build, your ability to have a conversation and talk your way out of a problem before it ever starts. Which again,
it's a big pie, and there's a lot of slices to it, and I like the thing you talked about is situational awareness, but I would say the number one most important thing, because if you're not aware of your surroundings, like, you don't have your head on a swivel, or you walk around at night alone, not paying attention what area you're in, those are going to be the things that's going to keep you out of the most troubled situations, you know? And one of the points that I think people forget about a lot of time is who they're learning from potentially. You know, the LEO guy, the former Spec Ops guy, they learned, to your point, a very offensive what they're going to go do, being a warfighter. Like that's awesome.
They have to go to the fight.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, civilians in the United States, if you're carrying a firearm, it's most likely going to be a Glock 19 pistol or whatever firearm you're carrying. And it's going to be a defensive situation. You're coming from concealed to using that firearm. Like that's what, as an everyday person defending your personal self or family, that you're going to do. Learning room clearance, all that stuff's going to be super fun, and watching YouTube videos on it is awesome. But it's like, knowing how to actually use your pistol and defensively and from a concealed carry, like that's going to be actually one of the most important aspects, at least from my opinion, because I look around me, I'm like, well, dude, we're all like normal people working jobs, living in cities, whatever. It's like, that's where we're going to need our firearm instruction. You know, running and gunning, as much fun as it is, and it's, again, another slice of the pie. Well, that's not the big slice right now.
So there's shooting and then there's tactics, right? And so there's that part of it too. And I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but what I like to do is go out and train and learn, going back to my fitness journey and my experience and always looking for, you know, who can I draw from and who can I take these things from? I think if some of these people at certain ends of the spectrum maybe looked at it from a little bit broader perspective, humbled themselves a little bit and go, hey, what can I learn from those civilians that are training over there in that particular realm, and how they train and how that might impact how I teach people, or what I could teach them, and maybe rethinking my thought process. Because I have to tell you, I've had lots of experiences now where it's like, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. You are thinking way differently than I would have ever thought about that, and you're not wrong. Wow, that's interesting. And you brought up the point. This is mostly defensive, and there's a lot of things. But here's the thing, like, there is no like one way, right?
Correct.
People are going to learn different ways based on access, based on availability, based on their ability to learn and those kind of things. And you know, standing in front of paper, shooting at paper at 5 yards, well, that's going to give you a certain amount of skill acquisition, but that isn't reality. So how do you start to bring in the reality, those other real pieces, like appropriately? And so we're starting to see some crazy shit happen. Like, come on, man.
Where
like,
it swings the other way.
Exactly. Yeah. So same with, like, you know, that was the thing with fitness. Oh, like, let me get this Bosu and this fucking band out and this thing here. And then this thing, you got people doing circus tricks, and they don't have the foundation, the fundamentals to even do the basic movement or the basic skill. So those are the types of things that I think need to be covered and are going to continue to evolve. And I think the conversations should, for the actual usage of firearms and the different applications, those are where they need to be. But there is a larger conversation that needs to be had about, you know, what our rights are, why we have them, and the realities behind that. And, you know, get some people talking at a higher level that can represent the needs, quite frankly, of the people in the middle of that spectrum I was just talking to you about. Because
80%.
We're not doing that. Like, our government isn't doing that. Our current commissions aren't doing that. The NRA certainly isn't doing that. Like, we some things need to change. And I think through creating more conversation, hopefully we'll start leading down that path.
For sure, man. I dig it, bringing awareness.